All the attention on Hyundai electric cars may be on the forthcoming Ioniq 5, but the Kona Electric is also continuing to develop. Now there's a mild update of the Kona Electric, which is mostly cosmetic, but actually includes some new trim levels. One of which is a sub 35k car with 300 miles of range, and this, the Ultimate Edition, all singing, all dancing. Before we start telling you about the Kona Electric though, if you enjoy this video, please don't forget to like it, comment on it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The external appearance of the Kona Electric has been subtly but importantly updated since we last reviewed the car a few months ago. The biggest changes are at the front, where before you could still see the vestiges of the Kona's fossil fuel heritage in a front grille. This now has been entirely smoothed out to make a much more streamlined look. The side lights are subtly different too, both front and at the rear. The plastic wheel arches have been replaced by body-coloured ones, which subtracts from the rugged crossover look but adds a smidgen of extra class. And that is mostly it on the external changes. It still looks like a small hatchback rather than the small SUV Hyundai claims it is. The bigger changes since we last reviewed the Kona are in the trims available. Where once there was SE Premium and Premium SE, the SE Connect, Premium and the Ultimate we have here. All cars have adaptive cruise control, a 10.25-inch media screen with connected sat-nav, 17-inch alloys and rear parking sensors with camera. The Premium trim adds wireless phone charging, front parking sensors, more safety features, heated steering wheel and front seats, and keyless entry. The Ultimate further adds ventilated front seats with electric seat adjustment, heated rear seats, head-up display, a sunroof and leather upholstery. There are lots of colour choices starting with a basic light blue. There are reds, darker blues, blacks, greys and white, ranging in price from £300 to £565. This car is Cyber Grey, a £565 option. There are no wheel choices, but the standard 17-inch alloys are a new design and reasonably striking. There are still two engine options with the Kona, 39 kWh battery with 136 PS motor and 64 kWh with 204 PS. The lesser option is only available with the SE Connect. The Premium can have either, and the Ultimate only has the most powerful drivetrain. The most notable change here is that Hyundai has lowered its pricing structure, so the Premium with more powerful engine is now available for under 35k and still gets a UK government plug-in grant. But we'll talk about that later in the review. First, let's make use of that keyless entry. As you can see, as I approach, the wing mirror is open, but that doesn't actually unlock the car. You have to press this button to do that. This is quite a good feature because it doesn't kind of hunt like some of the other keyless entry systems we've seen, where it kind of opens and closes as you stand in the proximity. So we rather like this. We think it's got the right balance. Let's take a look inside. Hyundai hasn't made significant changes to the interior of the Kona. It's still rather sober and no nonsense, like other Hyundais. The SE Connect and Premium come with black cloth seating, whereas the Ultimate we have here uses black leather. The driver and passenger seat have electronic adjustment on the Ultimate, but the SE Connect and Premium seats are mechanical only. They're heated on the Premium and the Ultimate adds ventilation. The Ultimate also has rear heated seats, apart from the middle one. These seats are comfortable enough and there's plenty of headroom thanks to the tallness of this car. So you get a couple of cup holders. You can see that this front one is a bit bigger than the one on the back. Handy, I guess, if you have different size cups. Underneath this flap here is a wireless phone charger, and you'll see it is actually big enough to fit a full-size phone, and there is a USB Type A port as well. There's a large cubby underneath the armrest. There's also this second tier underneath the central console, which is a little bit strange. At the front there you see it's got a charging port under a flap, which I can hardly reach. And then on this side here, you'll see that it's got a standard 12-volt car adapter, which supports up to 180 watts, so it could power some quite powerful devices. The Kona's glove box is actually a pretty decent size, which is handy because you can see the documentation is massive. As we already mentioned, the Ultimate Edition also has a sunroof. It's not panoramic, but it's quite nice. There's this manual blind to actually open the window bit, and then if you want to make it completely to the air, this button is how you do that. There's a really quite decent amount of headroom in the back as well. However, the knee room is really quite bad. This front seat is positioned for someone of average size, and I'm also of average size sitting in the back, and I don't have much knee room. So really these rear seats are for children, not really for adults for long journeys. The central seat is actually narrower than normal, so you'd have to have quite a skinny child, possibly even a two-dimensional child, to fit in this space. However, it does have a secondary function. You can drop this down, you get a couple of cup holders and an armrest here. What you don't get though are any air vents for the rear passengers or USB charging ports. and this is the top range model, so none of them have it. However, at least they will have some magazine holders for their copies of Attack on Titan, or whatever it is kids read these days. So really this is a car for two adults and a family with children. You get ISOFIX points on the outside rear seats, just reach into there to get to them. But you won't be able to fit young Tarquin in the front because there aren't any ISOFIX points there. Although Hyundai calls the Kona an SUV, actually when it gets to boot space it's much more like a conventional hatchback. This is 332 litres, which is very similar to most hatchbacks. You do get this little bit of extra space under here. There's a kind of nice little compartmentalised area, and there's a bit more underneath where there's some emergency supplies. Of course, you can actually remove this and put the rear seats down. You get the typical 40-60. You can see it's pretty easy to actually put the rear seats down from the back. This opens things out to 1,116 litres, which is almost identical to the Vauxhall Corsa E, which again shows that this is a hatchback, not really an SUV. However, it is very flat, but you're still going to be pretty lucky to get a double mattress from IKEA in the back of this car. Being an Asian car, it does have a hook for shopping or putting takeaway on. One thing we always notice with Korean cars is there's great attention to detail and some nice little features, like this one here. You see there's a little hook there just to hold the seatbelt in place when the seat goes forward and backward. Nothing special, but actually really handy. These are the buttons that heat the rear seats, but only in the Ultimate version. One area where the Hyundai Kona has always excelled is in range. With the 39 kilowatt hour battery, you get 189 miles, and with this 64 kilowatt hour battery, you get 300 miles of range. That's really pretty excellent. With the price change, the 64 kilowatt hour premium Kona Electric offers the most range of any electric car currently available. That still qualifies for the UK grant. There's a CCS port hidden at the front of the car, providing combined AC and DC charging. On a 7 kilowatt AC wall box, the 64 kilowatt hour battery will take 9 hours and 15 minutes to charge to full from empty, and a 39 kilowatt hour takes 6 hours and 10 minutes. There's also a 10.5 kilowatt AC charging, which takes 7.5 hours. DC charging is supported up to 100 kilowatts, so replenishing 80% for either battery takes 47 minutes. If you only have a 50 kilowatt DC supply, that increases to 64 minutes for the 64 kilowatt hour battery, but only to 48 minutes for the 39 kilowatt hour battery, showing that the 39 kilowatt hour battery actually doesn't get the full 100 kilowatt charging that the larger battery does. Overall though, this is a really cheap car to run. On a 14p per kilowatt hour supply, the larger battery is 2.89p per mile, whereas the smaller one is still a very frugal 2.99p per mile. Let's talk about the general controls of this car, starting with the steering wheel. Pretty standard wheel, actually round, unlike some of the wheels we've seen recently. On the left, we've got controls for media, volume, voice control. On the right are the controls for the adaptive cruise control this car has got. On the right hand side, you've got the windscreen wiper controls and one of the paddles for altering the level of regenerative braking. And on the left side, you've got another regenerative braking paddle and the controls for the lights and indicators. There are a few more buttons here on the right for things like operating the HUD, which we'll talk about in a second, parking sensors, traction control. On the left-hand side of the steering wheel is a start-stop button for starting and stopping. The dashboard is entirely digital, but it does have analog dials kind of faked on screen. The miles per hour is in the middle, but it also shows you that on the left-hand side as well. And then on the right-hand side, you've got another dial which shows the level of power delivery or regenerative braking. And you've got things like remaining miles on the left and actually what your power delivery means in terms of miles per kilowatt hour in the middle. This Ultimate version car has this rather nice head-up display, which gives you a few things like speed limit and warnings about lane departure. It's got a bevy of buttons down the bottom here. This one operates the drive modes between sport, normal and eco. You've got auto hold, you can turn off and on the rear parking camera, and these buttons on the ends let you configure heating and ventilation for the passenger and driver seats. There's a big selection of buttons here for operating the air conditioning. It'll be pretty easy to operate this when you're driving. However, it's worth noting this is not a zoned air conditioning, it's just a single zone. Another change with the new trim levels is that all cars now get this 10.25-inch central media control display. So you've got a map view. If you hit the navigation view, you can enter destinations, There's even access to address book. You can set up a favorite button. Now, this one isn't set up, but you could maybe choose EV. So now when you press that button, you get this nice selection of things on screen. These buttons here for moving through media. If you click on the radio button, you get a DAB radio, and there's also FM available. You can connect to media as well. It's worth noting that this car supports both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is always handy. Not all cars do that. BMW, are you listening? If you go to Setup, you get a nice row of icons. We're probably not going to go through all of them. Blue Link is the one that gives you connectivity for the Hyundai app, which is useful for things like remote charging. If you actually go to the vehicle section, we can do things like change the driver convenience settings. We can look at the drive modes. You can see Eco, Normal and Sport there. You can actually do your own custom ones. Eco Vehicle for smart recuperation, which is kind of useful. It means you don't actually use the paddles in that setting. And of course with this car you've got a head-up display, and this is where you reconfigure it. You can choose what goes on screen and also adjust it for different height of drivers. And here you can also customize what that digital instrument cluster does, which again, kind of handy if you like that. You've got buttons on either side, which are for operating things like the volume control and also for changing channel on your radio as well. The 64 kilowatt hour version of the Kona has 204 PS, which is the same amount of power as the launch versions of the ID3 and 4 from Volkswagen. That is a lot of power to put through the front wheels, and you do get torque steer. In fact, we've even managed to slip the wheels in the wet when we're accelerating hard. The 204 PS Kona is quite fast, taking 7.9 seconds to hit 62 miles per hour, although the 136 PS car is noticeably slower, taking 9.7 seconds to hit 62 miles per hour. Even in sport mode, the Hyundai Kona isn't as involving to drive as, say, the BMW i3, the Mini Electric, or indeed the VW ID3. However, it's still a good driving experience for a car that isn't really meant to be sports orientated. It's definitely one of the more enjoyable non-Tesla EVs I've driven. It's also reassuringly planted on motorways, which is welcome considering that this car's range abilities make it very viable for long journeys. Here we go. Let's take these suckers out. Okay, we're now going at motorway speeds, and it's feeling perfectly natural at motorway speeds. You get a decent amount of safety tech even with the SE Connect Kona. This includes autonomous braking with pedestrian recognition, as well as forward collision warning and lane keep assist. There's adaptive cruise control available across the range, a welcome feature in these days of heavy traffic and average speed zones. The premium trim adds intelligent speed warnings and blind spot detection. You also get rear cross-traffic collision warnings, which is for when you're backing out of a parking space. The Ultimate version doesn't add any safety features on top of that, but actually we can't think of any other safety features it could add other than full autonomous driving. This excellent safety spec is great news. Now we're about to talk about the new pricing differences with the new trim levels. Like many manufacturers, Hyundai reacted quickly to the UK government's change in its grant policy, and that's made the Kona Electric even more attractive than it was before. The basic SE Connect Kona starts at just under £28,000. That is £2,000 less than it used to be. The premium is just over £29,000 with a 39 kilowatt hour battery and £32,500 with the 64 kilowatt hour battery. All these prices so far include that government £2,500 grant. Considering how well equipped the premium Kona Electric is, that's a great price for a car with 300 miles of range. And remember, you get a full complement of safety features and even heated front seats. The Ultimate version I'm driving now, however, doesn't qualify for that UK government grant, and at over £37,000 feels a bit expensive. Yes, it's incredibly well equipped and still beats both the Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus and the VW ID3 in range terms. But if you are going to spend that kind of money, we would suggest you go £3,700 further and opt for the Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus. However, the insurance groups for the Kona are pretty reasonable. They range from 20 for the SE Connect to 24 for the Premium and Ultimate. For comparison, that Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus is in Group 48. Like most Korean cars, the warranty is excellent. The basic warranty is 5 years for unlimited miles, but the battery warranty is 8 years for 125,000 miles and 70% capacity. You also get a 12-year anti-corrosion warranty, which is really handy on a rainy day like this. Overall, Hyundai has reacted really well to the change in the government grant and the arrival of more electric vehicle choices. For under £30,000, we still prefer the VW ID3 over the Kona. But if you have more like £32,500 to spend on an EV, the 64 kilowatt hour premium is pretty hard to beat. The Hyundai Kona Electric was already a great EV, and in facelift guys, it's even better. The ultimate version we have here is supremely well equipped, but a bit pricey because it doesn't get the government plug-in grant anymore. Our pick is a premium 64 kilowatt hour. It's just as fast, has a similarly great specification, and of course it still has that 300-mile range. It's an excellent car for the money, highly recommended. If you enjoy this video, please don't forget to like it, comment on it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.